Who are the most dangerous dark horses in the NFL right now? Welcome, football fans, to another live stream on Bleacher Report. And in this live stream, I want to discuss the top 7 NFL dark horse teams, the teams that can make life difficult for the contenders in the playoffs, the AFC, the NFC, and which teams can truly shock the world. Before I get started, I want to discuss a division. I don't want to just discuss a team, but an entire division. Because at this point right now, man, as we sit, I have no idea who is going to win the NFC West. If you think you have an idea, please let me know. Because one week, I think it's going to be the Rams. One week, I think it's going to be the Niners. And then it's the Cardinals. And now it's the Seahawks. So really, I don't know who's going to make it. I can't justify only including one team. So let's begin this discussion by discussing the division, the NFC West. Because I think there is a theory behind each team as to why they could be dangerous. First, you look at the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are a team that are built on the infrastructure of Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. Well, I do recall at one point, those two individuals did raise the Lombardi Trophy. And there's just not many quarterbacks or many coaches that can say that about their NFL careers. So first and foremost, you have a team that has championship experience. You also have, at their best, an explosive passing attack led by Stafford, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp, moving the chains and really allowing them to possess the football against most defenses in the NFL. And you have a running game with Kyren Williams. So you have an offense that can go on the road. You have a quarterback that's experienced playoff success. And you also have a hungry young defense that can get to the quarterback. They are flawed, but they have experience. And they also have a good little combination of youth on the defensive side. There's another team in this division that right now it looks like their world has completely fallen apart. They have more injuries than I've ever seen in my entire life for one football team. But that being said, I don't think anybody really wants to play the 49ers in the playoffs if they get halfway healthy. The 49ers still do have a little bit of a mystique to them if they reach the playoffs, because we've actually seen them not only be a dangerous number 1 seed, but we've also seen them go to the NFC Championship as a team that was kind of counted out during even the 2021 playoffs where they reached it and they played the Rams. So this team in the playoffs, Kyle Shanahan as the coach of the Niners, he's only really lost to Patrick Mahomes and the one game that Brock Purdy got hurt, and then that Rams team. Pretty much every other playoff game the guy has been in, he's won. He's won like 3 out of 4 playoff games he's been a part of as a coach. So he has something when it comes to the playoffs. The team as a whole, if Trent Williams and Nick Bosa are there with Fred Warner and this unit offensively that can always move the ball, but they struggle in the red zone. There's just certain things about the Niners where they look like an elite team in aspects of their game where they can move the ball as well as anybody. They struggle in the red zone. They have special teams flaws, but they're solid on defense. If they put it together, that is the type of team that typically goes on a little bit of a run. But obviously it's going to take health, and it's going to take the Niners resetting a little bit this upcoming week. But I wouldn't count them out. The Arizona Cardinals are extremely intriguing after we watched them play the Minnesota Vikings, because I thought the Cardinals kind of deserved to win that game. And if not for their own red zone woes in that game, I kind of feel like they would win. And I was just overall impressed about how they played. They were on the road in a hostile environment, and I didn't really believe they were going to win that game. And they looked like the team that at the end of the day, I actually raised my opinion of the Arizona Cardinals. And a lot of it has to do with how well they're playing defensively, how cohesive their defense is, how scheme creative they are. Like, they were blitzing the Vikings like crazy. They can get pressure after the quarterback because of it. They play very well in terms of fundamentals and tackling. And then offensively, of course, you have the X factor of Kyler Murray, the roadrunner, doing his thing, extending plays, making magic happen with his arm or his legs. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside, Trey McBride, who's catching 10 passes a game right now. And obviously, they have a very good running game. So the fact that they have a very good running game that allows them to be able to stay in playoff games, they have a defense that never backs down from a challenge, and they have a quarterback that can play as well as anybody when he plays his best. So the Cardinals are also pretty dangerous. And then the Seattle Seahawks are that final team that are currently in the lead of the division at 7-5. The Seahawks are probably the most frustrating team in the entire NFC because they are explosive offensively, but extremely inconsistent. And defensively, they look like they're trending forward. But then in a game where it feels like they should handle the Jets on the road the way the Jets have been playing, I know the Jets are coming off the bye week, all that stuff. They have all these special teams woes where they're fumbling the ball constantly. Leonard Williams has to bail them out. But speaking of Leonard Williams, this guy's playing as well as any defensive player in football. And he is leading a defense that is ascending at the right point in time. They are really tracking as a top 10 unit in football right now. And because of that interior defensive line and the corners they have, I feel like they can play good defense against anybody in football. And offensively, with Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and 2-minute drill Geno Smith, they can put together drives and they can make, really big things happen. I mean, look at how they played a team like Detroit with many injuries on the road. They still kind of hung in there because they were able to throw the football against that team. So put that together with a decent defense, they'll be a challenge, especially if they host the first game in Seattle. 49ers are done. They won't make it in. They still have a chance, so I'm not ruling them out. They're 5-7. They're only a game back of second, I think a game and a half back of first. They still play multiple division games. They still play, some games that are manageable. It kind of depends on if they can get Trent and Boza back and Lenore back. Some big injuries that they didn't have against Buffalo. Bills was going to be a very hard game to win in that environment, in that snow. And then the McCaffrey stuff happens, which is just awful. Jade says West Coast teams and Southern teams getting exposed in the cold. Depends on the team. Like once upon a time, we saw the 49ers go to Green Bay in the snow and win. So it's possible. Like a team like Seattle, they play in the rain all the time. Maybe there's a little bit more questions about Arizona and Seattle in that regard. Or not Seattle, Los Angeles, I should say, because they're more dome teams. But that's a fair point. I think the Niners and the Seahawks are maybe a little bit more equipped to deal with it as opposed to the other teams. But that being said, they would host the first game if they do make the playoffs. Let's move to my list of dark horse teams, beginning with the team that I think personally is the biggest and best and darkest of the dark horses. That is the Green Bay Packers. I think if there is a team in the dark horse landscape that can reach the Super Bowl and potentially win the Super Bowl, I think it's the Packers. And the reason I say that is I think they showed a promise late last season to go on a run and piece things together and destroy the Cowboys and compete with the NFC champs to the point where people could have argued they could have won that game. Now this year, it feels like they started off all right. They're not losing games like they did last year, but they're not really piecing everything together 100%. All of a sudden, Thanksgiving football is here. And like Bill Belichick said, you want to be playing your best football after Thanksgiving. So the Packers, they destroy Miami in a spot where Miami historically struggles in the cold, but they put together a great offensive performance led by Jordan Love, who had one of his cleanest games of the season. They can run the football, and they're explosive through the passing game. And their defense, I feel, is more consistent than it's been over the past couple of years. So you have a Packers team that's playing well at the right time. We know they're talented. We know they have a good offensive line. We know they have plenty of receivers to work with. We know Josh Jacobs gives them an absolute workhorse in January in the cold. We know that the defense has plenty of individual talent. Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, Alexander, McKinney, who's been amazing this year. So the Packers, I feel like because they know the Lions really well and because they've played the Eagles already and played them competitively, this is a team that could go into any environment and win because they're used to the cold. They're high flying and fast. So the Packers are a team to really watch out for. Top 10 in points for, top 10 in points against, top 10 in run offense, and top 10 in run defense. Those are important metrics when looking at the playoffs. The next team for the dark horse list is the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans are, I would say, if the Seattle Seahawks are the most frustrating team in the NFC, the Texans are the most frustrating team in the NFL because they have lots of talent. They have very obvious flaws. Their biggest flaw by far is their offensive line. You know, a lot of people are wondering, why is CJ Stroud regressing? Why is he not playing like his rookie form? Is some of that on him individually? Absolutely. But a lot of it is systematic in terms of they can't block consistently, and they have issues with their offensive coordinator in terms of play calling. Now, where they're really dangerous is they have an excellent defense objectively. They're first in time of possession and plays allowed. They're also, second in yards per drive defensively. So they rank first or second in a lot of different kind of individual drive metrics. So they're great at rushing the passer. They've got a fantastic defensive line that can make any quarterback's life really brutal. And they have a number one corner in Stingley. They've got fast, vicious linebackers that are willing to knock you out of a game, apparently. And they have a defensive coach that brings a ton of energy. Offensively, with Nico Collins, they have a at least top 5 receiver in football who I think has the most yards per game in the NFL this year. Joe Mixon is playing like a top 3 running back. If it weren't for Derrick Henry and obviously Saquon Barkley, a lot more people would be talking about Mixon. So they can run the ball. They're explosive running the ball. They can throw the ball. They're explosive passing the ball because of Nico Collins. Tank Dell, you sprinkle him in there. Dalton Schultz had a good game against Jacksonville. And they're inconsistent. They rely a little bit too much on their field goal kicker. They run the ball on first down a little bit too much. And they struggle to protect on third and long a little bit too much. And they take a ton of penalties. But these are all kind of fixable things, it feels like. Like penalties are fixable. Calling a different play on first down is fixable. They have so much talent that it feels like they could win a defensive game or they could win a shootout. So that's why I like the Texans as a dark horse. With Stroud, it could just instantly click and they could become this team that goes on a little bit of a run, especially with a first home opener in the playoffs as that wild card team, just as they had last year. How about these Steelers, says Nick. I don't know if you're asking me in general or if you're asking me if they're a dark horse. I have them separated, so they're not in this video. But just to comment on the Steelers, I still view them, as a team that I think is a little bit of a capped team in terms of, I think they're a good football team, but I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender. I think they're like that team that floats between dark horse and contenders. That's kind of how I view them personally. I know a lot of Steelers fans have been very upset about that take, but we'll see how far they go in the playoffs because it feels like their defense at one week is fantastic, and it feels like another week their offense puts it together, but then it doesn't feel like there's any cohesiveness between this team. I would love to see some more dominant performances where their offense and Russell Wilson is fantastic and their defense is phenomenal. Feels like they're the wackiest good team in football, and they rely a lot on the Steeler voodoo. So if Russ keeps throwing for 400 yards, they're absolutely a contender. It's just a matter of, was that the Bengals or was that the Steelers? Feels like the Bengals defense can't stop a nosebleed. Let's get to the next team. Coach Laxer says Texans have no flow. I like the Packs upside. Texans do not have any flow, but given the playoffs, hopefully, there's less penalties for us as viewers. There's less penalties. That also could help the Texans play the style that they want, and they also maybe would be taking less penalties in that setting. Secondly, they're also very good defensively. So having a very good defense does allow you to stay in a lot of games, especially in an AFC that does not have a lot of elite offenses. The third team, speaking of the AFC, that I think has better balance than Houston, better coaching than Houston right now, more cohesion than Houston. They understand what they are. That is the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are the third team that I want to discuss here because Justin Herbert's playing as well as any quarterback in football. He's an absolute machine, and he's able to carry a pretty underwhelming supporting cast. If you're looking at supporting cast in the NFL, it's in the bottom 3, guys. Like, it's in the bottom 3, and I know that's not a compelling argument, but when Herbert's playing this well, as long as you've got Ladd McConkey on the field converting third downs, and you've got a sprinkle of a running game and good pass protection, Herbert can make something happen, especially when you're complemented by a defense that's 4th in the NFL in EPA, that's 1st still, I believe, in points allowed, that's, top 3 in the red zone, that's top 4 on third down. You look at very important metrics defensively, third down, red zone, those areas of the game. Chargers are very well coached and very good. They also have a dynamic pass rush when healthy, led by Khalil Mack, and they're solid enough against the run. And it just feels like Cameron Dicker is always making his kicks. They don't turn the ball over. Herbert has the best interception percentage in the league. They play very smart, and they don't beat themselves. And in a game against the Falcons where they probably should have lost, like, just based on the Falcons played better than them overall, as like they were moving the ball better. They had more flow to their offense. The Chargers didn't really move the ball. I think they had like 10 first downs. Like, that's not good against a bad Atlanta defense. But they didn't beat themselves. And sometimes you just need to win games like that. The Chargers of the past would not have won that game. The Chargers of the now won that game. So the Chargers are a different team now. It doesn't feel like they're that same old Charger. We're going to Charger it up at the end of the game. They're actually going to do the opposite, and they're going to win the game. So Chargers are dangerous as my 3rd dark horse. The 4th dark horse is the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are quietly one of the best teams in football in terms of record, and they just continuously win. It doesn't matter if it's pretty or ugly. The Vikings have won a lot of football games this year. And where you like the Vikings is, first of all, against any team in football, they have one of the best coaching staffs in the league. They're not going to get out-coached. That's a huge thing in the playoffs. They're not going to get out-coached offensively. They're not going to get out-coached defensively thanks to Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. Having a defensive coordinator like Brian Flores in a playoff setting, in a matchup setting, is so big, especially if you play a team multiple times during a season, because, you look at Steve Spagnuolo and what he's done for the Chiefs in these playoff games. Like, that's exactly what Flores has done. He's been a defensive coordinator for a Super Bowl team before in the 2018 Patriots. And, that type of defense, 3rd-ranked defense in EPA, a destructive, dangerous, chaotic defense that creates pressure, creates turnovers, creates negative plays. That's the best run defense in football right now. That is going to get you far in the playoffs. You complement that with an offense that's also top 10 in yards and points. Sam Darnold, as long as he protects the ball, has a complement in Aaron Jones in the backfield. You've got great receivers who are hard for any defense to cover in football: Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson. And whenever they are on, it's just hard to stop them, right? And then so you've got a great defense that can make big plays, that can make big stops, and that can never allow your run game to get going. And you can complement that with an offense that can be explosive and that can be balanced. So that's why the Vikings are definitely a dark horse. Rice says the Cardinals got robbed yesterday. They aren't that great. I'm not sure if you're saying the Cardinals are not that great or the Vikings. I do agree that the Cardinals outplayed the Vikings, but that, again, the Vikings, they're never going to get out coached. They're going to hang in games. Sam Darnold has been uniquely really clutch this year. Like, he has played some terrible football, and then in big moments, he's come through and he's been able to make those throws and make those plays to be able to win the game, which is exactly what Lionel says. Linnell. I still don't trust Darnold, but they're a solid team overall. They're a very solid team. They have very few flaws. You actually look at them, like, the offensive line is kind of my biggest concern, and that's what directly impacts Sam Darnold, because without Christian Darrisaw, I think they've taken a significant step back on the offensive line, and that might be their undoing. But if you look at just the rest of the team, like run offense, run defense, pass defense, red zone offense, red zone defense, things like that, they're pretty good across the board. There's nothing really to look at and say like, wow, they're going to be totally outmatched. And they've got a very dynamic defense, which I think will give a lot of offenses problems in big settings. The Packers are contenders. Vikings are pretenders, says Nicholas. Yeah, you could put the Packers in the contender conversation, but the fact that they're a wild card team doesn't necessarily generate, like, it doesn't really generate to me like contender status, especially because they don't have like a MVP caliber quarterback. Like, I think people would still consider the Ravens a contender, which is why they're not on this list, because they have Lamar Jackson, and I think they have the number 1 ranked offense in football and Derrick Henry. So, like, that's probably why people would consider them a contender. For the Packers, they just have not really put themselves there yet from a wide overall opinion perspective. But I do agree, they are a sneaky contender. The Vikings, I wouldn't be shocked, man, if the Vikings won 2 playoff games. Just the style they play. Like I said, they just don't lose a lot of games. They hang in every game. They feel like they play well in every game. So like they barely lost to the Lions, right? That was one of their losses, and that's one of the teams they'll have to compete with. We haven't seen the matchup against Philadelphia, but if you consider that the Vikings have the best run defense in football, that would very much help them against the Eagles. So I think they have things that are going for them that could definitely help them be a contender. I'm taking Darnold over Love right now. Darnold has played better for a stretch of the season, but in one singular playoff game, I'd rather have Jordan Love. I also think Love's playing a little bit better now. Wolfman says, say what you want, but the Vikings find ways to win despite not playing their best football and huge injuries that aren't easy to overcome. Yeah, I mean, especially Darisaw. I can't really think of another injury that's like really hurting them. I mean, they got Hawkinson back. He was out for a lot of the season. I don't think you would say J.J. McCarthy is a backbreaking injury, but hey, game to game, yeah, they've been able to survive the injuries because I think they've built their defense specifically with a ton of depth. Their offense is a little bit more top heavy, but their defense, a ton of depth, which really helps. Our next team that is, I think, a sneaky dark horse is a potential NFC South winner. That is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs are a dark horse because right now, and I know that he is coming off, in my opinion, the worst game of his season, despite having a great 30-second drive in the fourth quarter to set up a game-tying field goal and then an overtime drive to potentially put them ahead in overtime, not once, but twice. Baker Mayfield and the Bucs, Baker has been a top, like, at least 8 quarterback in football. And I think you could put him a little bit higher on that list. He's up there in terms of passing touchdowns. He's been a better scrambler than I've ever seen him. He's been more accurate and consistent than I've ever seen him. Does he throw the odd, stupid interception? Yes. But I think this team is kind of led by their offense, right? They're 6th in offensive EPA, which I think is probably the best offense on this entire list, other than a team that I'm going to talk about next. And I actually kind of like this offense maybe a little bit more come playoff time than that offense because I think they're more traditional. I think they can beat you in drop back game. They have a very good, diverse screen game and quick passing game. They're very good at running the ball this year. Bucky Irving has been a revelation. Rashad White is a talented receiver. Mike Evans is always a big game player. Cade Otton has come into his own. Imagine if this team had Chris Godwin. I think it would make them very challenging for a lot of different teams. But you've seen how the Bucs have played against good football teams this year. They wiped the floor with the Philadelphia Eagles. I know that was the most injured Eagles team we've seen all year, but that was still the facts. And they beat them last playoffs as well, and they kind of own them historically. Like they beat Sirianni's team in the playoffs not once, but twice. And I know that was Tom Brady once, but you know what I mean. So there is a little bit to that. Also, they beat the Lions, okay? So they beat the Lions, they beat the Eagles, who are the 2 top NFC contenders, and Baker is a dog. Baker is going to keep them in every game. They nearly beat the Chiefs. The game went to overtime, and they were very injured in that game. And their defense seemingly is getting a little bit better in the areas where they're typically good, which is like run defense. They've been a little bit better, right, as of late. And their pass defense is very suspect. But if you think about it, the teams that they have to beat in the NFC, Bowles does well against Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur. He's always done well against Matt LaFleur. You look at Bowles against the Eagles. You look Bowles against the Lions. Like, you look at the teams that they'd have to play, and it's like, well, maybe their weaknesses would not really come up as much as you would think. Plus, their defense is one of those defenses where it's like they're so chaotic that if things just go their way for one game, if they get a tip ball for an interception, if they get a strip sack because they sent 7 on a blitz, that could allow them to change the tide of the game. And then you've got Baker making plays in the fourth quarter and a kicker like McLaughlin who's making 50-yarders. And you've got a team that can challenge. Coach says Baker is a winner and a gamer. Saul says Tampa is overrated. I think, if anything, Tampa's underrated, actually. I think they're the best team in their division. I think they're the best offense in their division. I think they're a very compelling team. I'm not saying they're going to go very far, but they have a chance to. That's the point. All right. The Washington Commanders also have a chance to do some things in the playoffs. I have not been the biggest believer in the Commanders or Daniels for the entire season. I feel like Daniels and this team have put together a lot of great outings against bad football teams, and they did that once again against Tennessee. I have yet to really see them knock off an elite team, which is why, to me, they're a little bit less compelling than a team like Tampa, because Tampa has beaten the Lions and the Eagles, while the Commanders, they lost to the Steelers, and they lost to the Eagles, and they lost to the Baltimore Ravens, and they lost to the Bucs. They've lost to better teams, like teams that people think would be better, right? That being said, when you have the third best offense in football, and you have a quarterback that can create something out of nothing, and you have a quarterback that's continuously shown he has been exposed to big moments this season, and he's remained calm and composed, and he's been able to make plays with his arm or his feet, and you have an offense that is really good at running the ball, and you have a team that can possess the ball, and you have a team that's great in the screen game and great in the quick passing game. What that allows you to do is that allows you to hold the ball. And that allows you to, against an opponent that's better than you, it allows you to shorten the game. And you also have a quarterback that, if the game is close, he can come through with some crazy plays physically. So those are areas where I really like the Commanders, right? Possess the ball for a long time. You're playing the Eagles. Don't let them possess the ball. Let's get our quick passing game going. Let's run the ball a little bit. Let's possess the ball longer than the Eagles. Let's force them to play on their heels as opposed to us. And then let's make this game close in the fourth quarter, and let's not allow them to just physically overwhelm us in the running game because they're leading by 10 points. Let's make it a one-score game. Let's make Jalen Hurts actually throw the ball, and we'll go with that. And Dan Quinn can send some crazy blitzes at him, right? And defensively, Lattimore will be there eventually. And we haven't really seen this defense with Lattimore, and what Lattimore could bring to them is a potential shutdown perimeter corner that can allow them to match up with an A.J. Brown or somebody like that, right? Allow them to match up with some of these better receivers in the playoffs and kind of change the way that they're able to play run defense a little bit more aggressively, send some more aggressive blitzes. It has a trickle-down effect on their entire defense. So their offense kind of sets the tone, and as long as they don't get bombarded by the running game, I feel like they have a chance in a lot of different games. I'm not saying that they're going to be a team that is going to go on a run, but I definitely see the Commanders as a dark horse that could win a playoff game. I feel like that is definitely possible. Hayden says Commanders are a bit suspect, but they could scare some teams with their offense. I agree. All right, let's get to the final dark horse that I think could scare some teams. And if you guys want to comment any teams that I left off the list that you think are compelling, let me know. The Denver Broncos. Now, if the Commanders are all about their offense, the Broncos are all about their defense. The Broncos are the number 1 ranked EPA defense in the NFL. So this defense has been dominant this season. And we've seen them outside of, I would say, the Ravens game. they've gone toe-to-toe with the best offenses they've played, and they've played pretty darn well. They gave Baker and the Bucs their worst performance of the season, and that was with Chris Godwin, right? They absolutely, I thought, dominated Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in a game that they should have won. They have shown an ability this year to play defensive football. And you think about the AFC, the Bills are, in my opinion, the best team in the AFC. I don't think that's that controversial. They beat the Bills in Buffalo last year. Like, people forget about that. And it is a different Bills team. This Bills team's better than that Bills team. But there's still a little bit to that in your psyche, right? There's a little bit of, well, we saw Sean Payton's team last year have a good game plan and upset Josh Allen and the Bills. So is that possible? Maybe. They play the Chiefs twice, and they would play them 3 times if they faced them in the playoffs. That's a lot of familiarity. They obviously know how to play Mahomes really well and to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes, and they're a very good run defense. So they match up well with the Chiefs. Bo Nix will have more and more experience, and the way that the Chiefs secondary is playing right now, I feel like rookie quarterbacks could have some success against that team. The Ravens are the one where it's like, that's going to be tough, but at least it could look like that game would be at Denver and not Baltimore for the rematch. And maybe Denver has learned something from playing Lamar, right? Maybe, they didn't have a lot of success or experience playing Lamar before. You look at the Chargers, they're in their division. Okay, that could go either way, right? That's a one score, pretty similar type of teams. Don't turn the ball over, play good defense. The Steelers, right? That's a team that they know really well because Russell Wilson and Sean Payton experienced a season together that they didn't really like very much, but they know that very well. And I feel like their defense matches up well with the Steeler offense because you got Surtain to cover Pickens. You've got a good interior to stop the run. And you've got an offense that I think has been ascending throughout the season that can, have a great screen game, that can sprinkle in some explosives to Cortland Sutton, and a really good offensive line. And that's the thing about Denver, right? They've got the number one defense in terms of EPA. They've got arguably a top 3 offensive line. So when you have a really good offensive line, you have a really good experienced Super Bowl coach in Sean Payton, who's great at game planning one game. You have Vance Joseph as a good defensive coordinator. They've got a lot of pieces that make them very compelling as an upset threat. The thing that I think holds them back is having a rookie quarterback. Just like in general, a rookie quarterback does not really have success in the playoffs. Like, there's like a stat, it's very few and far between. And usually if you do win in the playoffs with a rookie quarterback, it's like Mark Sanchez and the Jets, where you have like an amazing defense and your team is loaded, and like somehow you do enough with the quarterback that you win. But usually rookie quarterbacks struggle. I also think their offense is kind of like smoke and mirrors to a certain degree. That's one of the negatives. But there are plenty of positives to be considered here, especially considering the competition. Woody says Broncos are the scariest dark horse. Interesting. Bo Nix is the truth, says JJ. Zeus says Houston can beat the Bills. I agree. Houston, that's something I didn't really bring up about Houston. I should have. That's probably their most compelling argument. I totally forgot, but thank you, Zeus. I forgot to mention that the Texans, without Will Anderson and Nico Collins, almost beat Detroit, and they did beat Buffalo. So those are 2 pretty compelling arguments when you're talking about, okay, who are the top 4 teams in football? Well, you got the Lions, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles in some way, shape, or form, right? The Texans could have beat one of them without the 2 of their 3 best players, and they beat another one of them. So, yeah, Texans are definitely compelling. Cordell says Broncos already played playoff teams and contenders tough already. They've only gotten better. I agree. The Broncos have definitely gotten better, especially offensively. Their defense has stayed steady the entire season. They've played the Chiefs really well. The thing is, though, they have not beaten a lot of teams, if I'm not mistaken. They have not beaten a lot of like top upper echelon teams, right? They lost to the Ravens. They lost to the Steelers, which was early in the year. They lost to Seattle. Like, a lot of their losses too were really early in the year where they've kind of gotten better. So it's kind of hard to say. I want to see how they play against the Chargers the second time, the Chiefs the second time, They play even like the Bengals just to see how they play against their offense. Like, not their defense. They should be able to torch them, but their offense, right? The Bengals can move the ball on everybody. So just seeing certain matchups for the rest of the season is compelling to me. Tonight, they play the Browns. They have a good defense. Cleveland has a good defense, and they've got the funniest player in football. So we're going to see how that works out on Monday Night Football. Broncos says Broncos can take the Bills. Yeah, we'll see. I wouldn't pick them necessarily, but I wouldn't rule it out, especially because, if you have to go to Buffalo, at least Denver is experienced in some cold weather and potentially snow as well. The problem might be Bo Nix, but he did play at Oregon. So Thrasher says, wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos found a way to beat the Chiefs after the voodoo they suffered if they meet again. Yeah, I mean, you have to deal with Taylor Swift, you got to deal with that, bro. I'm not gonna say anything crazy on Bleacher Report, but you got to deal with that. All right. You got to deal with their best player, the Zebras. Just saying. You got to deal with their best player. Thank you guys for watching. Those are the 7 dark horses to watch out for that could knock off the top contenders. It's Mitch. You can find me on the Bottom Line View on YouTube for more NFL content, and make sure to follow me here on Bleacher Report for upcoming streams every single Monday morning. Thanks for watching. Peace.